Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to a special episode of Chhaya Talk. I am your host, Chluy. Today, I got a very special guest. Her name is Chhaya Chhoum from the Bronx, and she is the
Yes.
founder of Mekong NYC. Mekong NYC aims to improve the quality of life of the Southeast Asian community in the Bronx and throughout New York City by achieving equity through community organizing and healing, promoting arts, culture, and language, and creating a safety net by improving access to essential services, social services. The Southeast Asian community in the Bronx primarily consists of Cambodian Americans and Vietnamese Americans. Mekong
Mhm.
NYC is where history and culture are valued and learned, where history and culture are living, where people's needs are met, where people are united through struggle, and where the people feel liberated.
Yes.
Welcome, Chaya. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being my guest. First, I want to thank you for
Yes.
squeezing me in your busy schedule, and also want to, thank you for all that you do for the community, and
Mm,
especially like the New York Khmer community, and and
mm,
I've always wanted to speak to you, and I know that I've been getting
mm.
a lot of invites like every year, every Khmer New Year, I miss an event in New York City.
I know
So
because
I'm like, I
you're
feel
so
bad because
busy.
I'm always home. My hometown Seattle. So if you don't know, so I'm always going home to visit
Yep,
my parents and stuff like that.
as you should. That's
And
what a good Cambodian son does.
yeah, so but I definitely want to get more involved and
Mm,
in and meet the Khmer community here in New York.
sure. Hmm.
And I'd love to learn more about you on a personal level, and just give
Sure.
you, if you want to just introduce yourself, give a little bio so that people know.
Yeah. So uh I was born in Cambodia in 1978, and so I had a refugee birthday, like a lot of folks who were born during the Khmer Rouge regime. And so I tell this story all the time. My on my 30th birthday, my husband and kids decided to throw this like huge surprise party for me. And my dad was like just looking very uneasy. And this story has a point. So he was looking very uneasy, and he was like, I just want you to know that you were actually born in 1979 and not 1978. And I was like, oh, it actually makes a lot of
Mm,
sense because in 1979 was when you were Joe, right? Khmer you were Joe, or
mhm.
the when Vietnam came and liberated us from the Khmer Rouge, and so I was like, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense because you said I was born during that time. And so, and then they said it was sometime around New Year. So my birthday is April 1st, 1978, right?
Oh,
So, um, but my dad says otherwise. So I get to celebrate 30 twice that year, in that second year.
oh,
So I think, I share that story because it's the story of many of us who came in as a young survivor. Like I didn't realize I was a survivor until I started doing this work. I was 7 years old when I landed in the Bronx, and we were resettled in the Bronx, and we stayed ever since. And so I am a refugee child, but I'm also a Bronx girl. So folks get really complicated and don't understand. Sometimes they're like, wait, your accent,
mhm.
all the time. But I think that history really grounded me in why we started Mekong and who I am. So, and why I'm committed to our community and why I'm committed to building community, and also the healing and the organizing and the process of addressing like trauma in our community, intergenerational trauma. So not only am I a survivor, but I want to be part of the healing process of our people as well. So
Wow.
that's a little bit of how I came to the Bronx and got to what I'm doing.
Wow. Salute to you. I love your New York accent.
I
Yeah.
don't realize it. I don't realize that I have an accent until people tell me, right? I'm like, what are you
Mhm.
talking about? They're like, look at you. Look at you with your hand. And I talk with my hands, it's
Mhm.
like a whole. So, and then I'm like, oh God, I was never before, like just growing up in the Bronx, like that's all you knew. And like, and I don't know if you recall this, but the Bronx, the war on drugs was real. And we were basically resettled in like horrible housing conditions in the poorest neighborhoods, in already marginalized, disinvested neighborhoods in Black and Brown communities. And so, coming from literally one war zone to another.
Mm.
you know? And so, and that's actually a little bit of what the work that I do around, you know, understanding what it means for us to be free and liberated, right? You know, in Mekong statement with other communities of color who already lived here when we were here. And so, so growing up in the 80s and seeing, you know, Fordham Road, I grew up on Fordham, you know, and so like just such huge disinvestment. The Bronx was literally burning, right? And so, so for me, it was like, it's actually an honor to be able to be grown and bred and raised in the Bronx. Hip hop, you know, grew out of the Bronx. And so I grew out of the Bronx. And so, but one thing I realized is that the Bronx wasn't very different from the refugee camps that I grew up in. And so those are the kind of connections I want my people and our people to have when we talk about social justice in this country, right? That we didn't come because like, you know, America was like, we should save them. No, actually, there was a lot of organizing from the civil rights movement to really bring us here. So yes, we're here because of the Refugee Resettlement Act, but we're actually alive because of the Black organizers that organized and went to interview folks in the refugee camp and advocated for our very existence and our life here in the United States. So a very complex history. And I look at the work that I do through those lenses in my personal and political life and work life, that it actually is personal for me, is very political. Because the reason why, like I tell my uncle, I don't know, like he's always like, oh, you know, Chhaya is always, or they don't say Chhaya, like Chhaya, you know, is always into politics and political, the yobai. And I was like, I have to. Like, the reason you don't get your diabetic medicine is because it's politics. You know, the reason why our folks are being deported is because of politics. The reason that we continue to be re-traumatized, re-triggered, you know, and our community continue to suffer from, you know, the war in Southeast Asia is because of politics. So telling me not to be invested in politics or organizing is telling me not to love my people, my uncle, my family, my community. So I hope other folks can join and be part of that.
I'm learning and I'm visualizing what you're saying, and you're right. I agree with what you're saying about politics. You know, like they like whether they like it or not, or like the reason why Americans are here is due to a political decision, and you know, and everything's politics. You know, people have to vote for things, for policies, for laws, and just so you know. And I think with everything that was going on, like within the last year, you know, it opened my eyes because I'm learning a lot from what's going on with like you know, like police brutality and stuff like that. I'm like, you know, just trying to do my part and sign petitions, share links to help, like, you know, the whole George Floyd situation. Right. So I was like, dang. So that made me want to really like read more literature on what's going on because, you know, like you said, like because of the civil rights movement, we are here, you know, Black civil rights movement. So I learned that more recently. Thank you.
And I really appreciate you bringing George Floyd and all the other folks that killed by police brutality, especially Black people. You know, it has been really just like it's the mind work, but also the heart work, right? To understand what's happening in the America that we live in. And the America that we live in is an America that actually hates Black people, right? And so like this country is built on the hatred of Black people. And so until, you know, I'm in a Black body, I actually would never know what it means to be Black, but I can be in solidarity. And what I mean by us being in solidarity, to your point, yes, the petitions, all that stuff, going out in rallies, my daughter and I going every day, because if Black people are free, we will also be free, right? And I think that our folks don't believe that because we have so much anti-Blackness built in our consciousness and in our living, you know, even in the terms like khmer, you know, all that stuff that khmer people talk about. And like, yes, we actually need to change. There are some cultural things in our community that devalue Blackness. Even like you and me are like considered dark, you know? And so, and whiteness is beautiful and things like, so there's things that we can start talking about in our community that actually have us begin to talk about where anti-Blackness come from? Like, what does the hatred of Black people come from? Where does that come from? And I think about George Floyd in Minneapolis and the organizing that happened in Minnesota. And, you know, one of the biggest lessons for me, and I would love to hear what your lessons were, you know, like one of the biggest lessons for me was Frogtown. Frogtown was where like folks started organizing where Target was at. So like all the Asians and like all the small businesses were all Southeast Asian businesses in that neighborhood. And so one of my friends, you know, who's an organizer was like, fuck Target, people are dying, you know, like we're valuing property more than we do lives, you know? And so with that, what I learned is that Frogtown was the reason why Southeast Asian business was there is only because they didn't allow Black business to thrive or to even open. So, you know, in the Bronx for a very long time, then we've been trying to build, like, can you imagine a little Southeast Asian in the Bronx? We have the largest population of Southeast Asians. I had to come to a place of like understanding, like, actually, we have to actually honor the history of the people that were here before us that couldn't even open up stores because of redlining. They couldn't live in this neighborhood because of redlining, because of laws that were placed to basically keep Black people in place. And so, you know, now we're that's a lesson for us, you know, like we're not gonna claim to any land, you know, especially this is indigenous land. And so what we're going to do as Southeast Asian is create opportunities and to engage with other communities, you know, and bring our own analysis and our own experiences to talk about trauma, to talk about displacement, to talk about what it means to be displaced so many times in your lifetime. And, you know, like we could, the correlation is the organizing that people are doing around housing. And people being gentrified, neighborhoods being gentrified, right? So like, as displaced people, like I know that our narrative and our experience is critical in the analysis and in the policy and in the storytelling and in the changing of heart and minds of policy around gentrification. So I always find an opportunity to share our story so that our story can free other people as well. And so, you know, that's the work that we need to do as artists like yourself, as activists like my organizer, you know. And so I'm glad you are engaging and thinking in that, because their liberation is so tied to us. And to also say that we actually need to be really pro-Black, like support Black businesses, Black people. And until we're in Black bodies, we will never know what it means to be Black. And like their body is constantly being attacked, right? You know, Black bodies. And so I can wear cornrows and it'll be beautiful, but a Black woman will, you know, can't wear cornrows and be called beautiful. She's called ghetto, all these other things. So we got to think about like those small things. And a point that I want to make, I'm trying to think of how to put this, is that I know my parents, our parents who lost people during the genocide, during the Khmer Rouge regime, during the war, in transition to this country, in this country being separated. Like we've been calling for justice forever, right? So every day. And I hope that our community understands that when Black people are calling for justice for 400 years that they've been in slavery in this country, that we understand that their calling is our calling for justice too. And so I really want to like stress that, because if we're still calling for justice for our people in our community, and you could call justice for another community, then do that, right? Do that. And that means in our community addressing anti-Blackness, you know, supporting Black business, all that stuff that comes with it. There are performative stuff where people perform, wear t-shirts, raise their fists, you know, all that stuff. So being pro-Black is actually really important, and doing things that uplift Black leadership is also very important.
I totally agree with that. So what was it like growing up in the Bronx in the 80s and 90s? What type of like challenges did you face besides like what you already mentioned?
You know, when you're a child, you see everything from such a beautiful lens. Like even in refugee camps, I was like, they would have theaters, and you just didn't realize you were living in a refugee camps, right? So, and I didn't realize I was living in the hood or the ghettos of the Bronx. And so I built really amazing friendships, had a lot of supportive teacher, but violence was always there. My parents getting mugged, my aunt getting mugged, my uncles who was in high school was getting jumped, so they joined gangs, and so to protect themselves. So for me, the struggle, I realized later on, is it wasn't just a Southeast Asian struggle. It was a struggle of an America that hated poor people, that kept people poor, that kept people divided, that created wedges, that uplift white supremacy. And so when I was growing up, I was really like, there was a sense of community though. People protected me. There were people protecting me, but because the system failed us, the system didn't create policies and resources for communities. Community fought for whatever was there, right? And so the root cause isn't, what's his name mugging my mom. Like I had to really struggle with that because there's harm caused, and look at the rise in anti-Asian violence now, like calling for more policing, but we know more policing means more Black bodies in jail, right? And so we're not going to do that. So yeah, growing up in the Bronx made me really hard, like don't mess with me kind of attitude all the time. But I think that's the kind of attitude you need to have, like, in order to survive in this brutal system, in this country that hates Black people, that treats poor people in such inhumane way. And we think about like human rights violation outside of the US. It's happening here in the US every day, And so, and it's our job that, as we live in the belly of the beast, to call out those things.
Right. And
I don't know if that really answered your question around growing up.
No, it does. It does. One thing that stood out was like the muggings, the jumpings. I remember when I was growing up in Seattle, like I remember like my dad's. He was anti-Black. He said we got the khmer plotting. Like, do you think that's why they are anti-Black? Because of like some of us were the first generation Khmer, like, they experienced maybe like robbings or muggings or whatever. And they think because of one person, they want to just be like, all Black people are bad or thieves or whatever. You think that kind of like maybe where the anti-Blackness started within our parents? Like a lot of like my parents back in the day, they were just right off the gate, like prejudice or whatever, or they just didn't know, or we were like, poor too. So, and we're immigrants. So racism was a thing as well. So.
Yeah, anti-immigrant is real. And so to your question, yes, I'm sure that informed what they thought about Black people. But this happened even like the formation of teaching us to like hate Black people, hate Black skin happened even before we came to this country, before we even landed here, right? And so inserting us into urban poverty with other communities who are poor, these harms are going to be caused, right? Like whenever we're in community, harm is going to be caused. And it's how we struggle through it is important, right? And so, yes, the individual experience informed that, but I remember watching cops. I don't know, in the refugee camps, like they have, little TVs and things like that you can go watch. And like, there was a sense of like, just, that was embedded. Like, do you remember cops? You do, right?
Bad boys.
Bad boys.
What you gonna do? Yeah.
I
used to watch that show.
Come for you, and it's always Black folks.
Right.
Right.
Now that I look back, it's like it's always that way.
Always. And here's the other thing. When we were at war in Southeast Asia, when they were bombing us, right? Most of the people in the front line fight were Black and brown people who were put in the front to like kill, shoot people, right? And so you have the white commanders. And then we go to the refugee camps. All you see is the UN workers, all white folks saving us, right? And then you come to the Bronx, you come to the United States, you put in these neighborhoods with all people that are causing harm are Black, brown people. So these systems that were set up for us to imagine an America, to believe in an America that was about white savior. And so I think about that journey and I think about that history because it's so connected. It is going to be so connected to our liberation, and particularly our fight to end the deportation and returning our people back from Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. So, I think about how the US created this huge impact, right? And basically slaughtered people in Southeast Asia, secret wars, secret bombings. So all to say that, yes, it's through individual experience, but it's also through a very systematic ways in which, the white savior complex got played into our existence as well. Like, I don't know, Dad says, "Oh, America save us." Is that something like that? You hear that, right?
I think so. Yeah.
But they also bombed us. I mean, and that's the thing. We see violence in a very narrow way. Like, it's violent that I'm hungry. It's violent that my aunt don't have her diabetes medicine. It's violent that I live in poor housing conditions. It's violent that I'm working for $5 an hour in this fucking factory. That's violent. And yes, and it's also violent when you're beating your wife. And it's also violent when Boo is beating his kids. Like, if we're going to talk about violence and want to denounce violence, is it because the violence that we denounce is from Black people, but we can't denounce violence from white people or from each other? And so that's the question I would want to pose for us to think about, because that's a moment of growth for our people, right? And that's the work of Mekong, and that's my work too, as we move through this pandemic, as we move into this, fight for racial justice in this country, that those are the questions and these are the moments of growth that we need to engage our family, our brothers and sisters in conversation, because violence is right in our home.
Correct. When did you start Mekong? And how did you decide to start it, the organization? What led you to form it?
Yeah. I was doing youth organizing through called CAV. And through that, we ran something called the Youth Leadership Project. And it was the only program for Southeast Asian young people in New York City, in the Bronx. And I became director of that program. And through that process, and this is very young, like, we were advocates before we even knew we were advocates at health clinics, at, food stamps lines, at food stamp centers and things like that. So organizing and advocacy work came really natural to me. Because I was doing that for my grandmother, for my mom, for my aunt, making sure that going to fight people at the food stamp centers and arguing about why their food stamps are getting cut, and why, they're not paying our rent and things like that. So it was through my own personal experience that I began to envision an organization like Mekong that can really serve the Southeast Asian community in New York City. And so we decided through that organization to build another organization that wasn't, because it was a Pan-Asian organization at the CAV. And we wanted to build an organization in the Bronx led by particularly women and queer folks of Southeast Asian descent. And so Mekong was really founded by women and queer folks to organize, to build community, and to fight for social justice here in the Bronx. And there was a deep recognition that, it was 20 years. We were already resettled about 20 something years, and our community remained the same. And, and then we were getting deported, and our food stamps and welfares were getting cut. So we realized that our community have not grown. Like, our community is a product of all these failed policy, US policy consistently. And not just us, but other Black, brown communities too, And so we wanted to start an organization that valued the leadership of women and queer folks, That's one. Two, that really address the failed refugee resettlement process here in the United States, and particularly in the Bronx, New York City, that prioritize like intergenerational cultural work with each other, right? That prioritize organizing and advocacy work, but really at the root of it, to fight for social justice in a way that the most Khmer way that we can be, the most Vietnamese way that we can be. And so, we are a Vietnamese and Cambodian-led organization. And so we take pride in that. We only hire from the neighborhood in the Bronx, but we've hired in the last couple of years people from Brooklyn, Vietnamese and Cambodian folk, So as we grow, our intention as the only Southeast Asian organization in New York City is to serve, organize, and build community power. And what that can look like can be many things. But I think one thing for sure for us is that when we talk about trauma, we know that, we've come to also realize that healing is really a lifelong process, but we need justice now, right? And so what that means is we get our people organized on the street to fight for George Floyd, to fight for Breonna Taylor, like all the stuff, to fight for our people return to back from Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. So as we do the healing cultural work, the intergenerational work, we are committed also to building like a social justice movement, to be part of a movement that will inspire other generations, that will leave behind, what generations of folks are going to come before us. And after us.
After.
Yes, not before. Before us too, because they need justice too, the generations before us.
I think first time we met, I think I met you through Bang Narin. I think it was like a deportation event or some sort of, or it was in, we went to Bronx, me and Narin.
Yes,
and a friend. We went
at
to
Manhattan College. Yes, we were doing, a symposium. Mm-hmm.
Symposium. I remember that. So, and at the time I asked you about like a citizenship because I lost my citizenship, but it was pretty basic. I finally took care of that now, and I just got my passport. So it was, I just kind of.
Congrats! Now you can travel the world.
Yeah. So it took a lot of weight off my shoulder. It wasn't too bad. I thought the process was more difficult than it was. But it was actually pretty straightforward. Pay the fee, sign your name. So, yeah, and just so happy to have my passport. Now I can't travel because of the pandemic. So how you been holding up with the whole panoramic of the pandemic?
Oh my goodness. I mean, from remote learning, 3 kids remote learning, from me remote working, from like me running an organization that was doing on the ground work of like giving families money, doing care packages for our seniors and our elder, like all folks who've lost their jobs. So I mean, at one point I was like, am I even breathing? And then my family catching COVID, 5 households, scared me to death, and made me feel like even through that process, I felt really guilty because my dad is 70, and like he survived it. And I'm like this other 70-year-old person that I know who's like this amazing artist, Corky Lee, I don't know, had caught at the same time my parents did, and he didn't survive. And so, I think there is a lot of emotional reckoning. There's a lot of just like healing and mental health needs that we need. I don't sleep as much. I don't know if other folks sleep. Part of it is because we're social beings. But it just feels so isolated, and especially for our elders who, when we deliver, I tell you this, like, we always knew that, domestic violence existed in families in our communities. And when we were delivering care packages, finding out things like that, like home is not safe for everybody. And then trying to figure out like how to get someone out of that, how to get these kids out of these situations. And so, learning so much more about the needs of the community. And it's been really stressful. The only silver lining is that like my kids and I are really close. Mommy's always away at work all the time, and so on a personal level, things like that. But also, like, I'm really concerned about my kids' mental health. You know, my son who had caught COVID, he's like, I'm so depressed when that was happening, and having to like talk to him every day, and making sure that he was okay. And so the work isn't done. This pandemic has not shown itself completely, and I am really scared. I am scared that there are so many re-triggering of trauma for our community members. And so I look forward to seeing what like collective healing would look like, and our work for Mekong in the future, and for organizations who are on the ground, and for people. I can imagine what the healing process can look like. And I know it's going to take a collective process. And so, but it's going to be a lifelong process.
Right. So you said you had your kids catch COVID, like in your household, like more than one, or?
So I live in a multi-generational household. You know that. That's the only way I can afford to live in New York City with the pay that I get as a nonprofit executive, things like that. And so on the first floor is my mom, the second floor is my aunt, third floor is my family, right? And so thank goodness, because it really does take a village to raise the kids in this time, in this period. And so my dad was like, don't let anyone come in my house. He was always, even when I went downstairs, he was masked up, and we live in the same household because he knew I was going out, and the majority of my family member worked in the hospital. And so we had to be very thoughtful and careful. Like, they had to like take the clothes off outside, things like that. So like we were trying to like distance ourselves within the 3-generation household. And so New Year's Eve, I think New Year's, like a couple of days after that, we like got our youngest, my niece, who's our youngest baby, her birthday. And then one of our family members was like not feeling good. And I was like, this is not, I don't know if we should be doing this, even though some of us will mask. So like for a whole year, my dad kept people out of his house. And that 30 minutes of coming together was how COVID got passed. And so one after another, you don't understand, 15 people, 5 households. I had to like monitor every single day. And I had to cook for them, because meanwhile, I'm doing like a renovation in my kitchen. So I didn't even have a kitchen. So I had to like buy Instant Pot to make, ball, sngao, all the stuff that, I could make them langa, And so buying vitamin C, vitamin D, testing their monitor for their oxygen level every day. Like I was like anxiety driven. Like I couldn't sleep at night. Meanwhile, I was still working. So meanwhile, I was still running an organization. Grants were due. People payroll needs to be met. So all that stuff. And so I'm still trying to figure out what that impact for me is. And when I have time to reflect, I will. And when I have time to sort of breathe, I'm sure that I will be rushed with emotions, and I'm going to take it as it is, because I know I'm not the only one that feels like this. Sadness, joy, pain, all at the same time. And so so it was really, really hard, and hoping that you don't lose someone, and every day it's like 2,000 people died, 3,000. You're like hoping that it's not one of your family members, but then you also feel guilty because somebody family member is dying, and so it's a mind trip and a half. It was really challenging.
Yeah, seriously, you're a superwoman, just doing God's work. It's so thankful for you.
I learned from my mom, from my grandmother, my mom, the matriarch of our family.
Mekong. What is that annual event that you do that I keep missing? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we do annual New Year's celebration every year. It is one of the biggest celebrations. We only probably have 2. Our community is really small in New York. So there's usually only 1 to 2 parties that are being put together. And you know how important New Year's is for Khmer people. I mean, the way Khmer people celebrate is so Khmer.
It's like my Christmas. It's like my Christmas, I look forward to April more than I do in December, for sure.
For real.
Sure. Yeah.
For sure. It's like Khmer New Year. It's like Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year combined. You know what I'm saying? And like when you see the way people in Khmer celebrate, you're just like, oh my God, you know? And so I went back to Khmer with my daughter in 2019, actually right before the pandemic hit, to do that's another story, but like we were doing some art and healing work out there with another organization. And so I brought her and a group of young people with us, right? Because Mekong also has a youth program. And so, you know, she was like, my goodness, like just the way like people celebrated. And this wasn't even New Year. It was like or something like that. And like for a whole month, she's like, Ma, I gotta come back in April. I'm like, no, April is like 100 degrees in Maya, if you could take it. But that annual event is what you keep missing. But we have so many other events throughout the year because we also celebrate Tet, which is Lunar New Year in Vietnam, in Vietnamese. And that for them, that's also like Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's combined, you know? And so I think if there are moments where we can celebrate our culture, when there's moment for us to celebrate joy, to bring community and people together, we do it. Along with other stuff, right? Going to the streets, organizing, protesting at rallies. And so I know, and I teach my daughter this, and like even in the organization, which is that our work as like healers, organizers, is also about like changing the culture of our community, right? Like we should keep what's good and we should take away what's bad in our culture. And so as young people experience these cultural things, you know, yes, we dance, we have fun, but we also see that the man got way too drunk putting hands on his wife, so we're gonna have to intervene. Like, nope, we don't celebrate that way. That we're not cool with that. To see our culture in its wholeness, you know, the good and the bad. And we keep what's good and we don't keep what's bad. And I think that's that annual event for us is really about that.
With the COVID just getting worse, it's looking like another virtual New Year this year, right? I don't see people opening for anything. So let me know if you guys have a virtual event. I'd love to be involved. You know?
Yeah, that'll be dope. Now you can't say anything. You can't be like, I'm not here, I'm in Seattle.
I'm in town,
but,
you know?
Going home is really important.
Yeah. I was
And
supposed to go
going home
last
is actually
year.
really important.
Yeah, I missed my niece's birth. So I didn't get to meet my niece. My sister had her first baby. But yeah, it happened, you know.
In this year or last year?
Last April, last New Year. She was the Khmer New Year baby. She was born right on Khmer New Year.
Wow.
I think it was like the 16th or something. Yeah. And the crazy thing is, she looks like me when I was a baby. Like she has my facial features. Like wow. Really cute. Named Amelia.
I'm sorry you've missed that, but you'll meet her soon in person, right?
Facebook,
Have you gone back yet?
Not yet.
Yeah.
I'm still playing it safe. I haven't really I've been pretty cautious. I just go to a grocery store, get my food, and come back home. I don't go nowhere really. I went to that Fuzz Spot outdoor dining a couple times, but even then I still kind of nervous. But
it's real. Like people still don't believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Subway. I haven't been on since I haven't been on the Subway since March of last year. Yeah, because I care for like my family, like my girl's grandma lives upstairs, so I don't, I just more, for their sake, I don't want to, chlong it over there, get them sick.
Yeah. And I think that's what people didn't understand. Like, this is a public health issue. It ain't just like, this ain't personal. If I'm asking you, if you come in my house, I'm asking you to put on a mask, or I don't want to be sick. Like, and that was like the hardest part actually in talking to our community members, because they're like, oh, but a lot of kids were still like going out and like doing things, and I'm just like, no, please, no more hookah, and so like, and it became about policing behavior. But no, actually, if you understood what public health is, you would understand that what we do as an individual impacts other people. And so I'm glad you took those precautions and really stuck to it, because look, it took 30 minutes for my family. And he worked in the hospital, and he just got vaccinated a couple of days before, like his first vaccination, and he still caught it. And so, and that's the other thing, like vaccine isn't 100% either, but I encourage people to go get vaccinated, because hopefully we'll get to herd immunity soon. And I don't even know, do you think that you could go into a crowd right now and be okay? I don't know. I feel crazy, right?
Yeah, I get nervous seeing like people on like Facebook Live throwing parties,
Yes.
karaoke events where they're, even if it's a family event, there's a lot of people in there and you're just partying like it's 1999. But like,
Yes.
I get nervous for them, but well, hopefully, things will get better. I mean, it takes all of us to like,
Yeah.
to get,
Mm-hmm.
and also I wanted to touch on the Asian attacks. It's been going on.
Yeah.
Like a lot of it in the Bay Area, but I've seen some like in Queens just recently. Like I'm on TikTok and people posting a lot of like graphic footage of like elderly getting attacked for no reason. So it was like, and it's happening more and more. And I just want to like see what we can do to help raise awareness.
Violence against Asians been happening. Violence against Black people have been happening. Violence against our senior has been happening. And so I think this is a moment for us. And this is something that, Mekong is beginning to develop. I think one of the things that we recognize is that we're not going to support anything that increases policing in our community. And so puts more programs into our senior centers, and seniors. Like I've been fighting the city for Southeast Asia senior centers in the Bronx for a long time. So my thing is like, you want to talk about defunding the police, fund programs for seniors. And so here's the other thing I know is that our community members still get mugged all the time. But you know what we do? We call his mother up and be like, your son mugged this older woman in our community. And so can we have a conversation about that? And so I know there's alternative to violence. And I know there's alternative to accountability too. So I think at the same tone in which we are hurt to see like elders in our community this way, we should also be thinking about other ways that we can come together as a community, that we can grow, that we can challenge anti-Blackness, right? Because like for real, that's like people see a Black person doing it. That's why it's so like bad, right? And things like that, and like the way it's being framed internally in our community.
Yeah.
And so I invite folks to think about those things, and I invite folks to think about what's been missing in our community that created these individuals act of violence, right? And like from systems, and so that we can challenge it and that we can fight for the money that we pay taxes to, right? If you can invest billions of dollars into NYPD, you can invest billions of dollars into youth programming, right? And I'm not talking about just like, summer youth program. I'm talking about the young person who has two uncles for final order deportation, who just lost his house. The parents just got divorced. And so where does he go? He goes to community-based organizations and people that he knows closest, not to the city, And so for me, then, like, let's talk about moving resources. Let's talk about how we can grow. What are the opportunities to hold each other accountable? And what does accountability look like? So I always give this example, like we talk about this with our young people, and this is a sensitive subject on many levels because like his dad would beat his mom like almost every day. And so, he started talking about it, opening up about it. And then like, we're like, so what does justice look like for you? What does accountability look like for you? And so, I think those are the questions we need to ask ourselves, right? And like, to where he was like, I don't want my dad in jail, right? Like that's real. But I want him to stop. So we have to have a conversation of how he needed to stop doing that. And so I have hope for the human race. I have hope for our people and other people to really lead in this sense of anger and injustice in a way that brings community together, that allow us to see how we practice violence also in our own lives, and think about how like, as I'm surviving systems, as I'm surviving patriarchy I think about who's surviving me too, right? So, I'm angry, I come from work, I'm like, damn it, this thing, this and this and this. And, I say to them, like, leave me alone. I talk to my kids, and I'm like, oh goodness, like, and so I hope it is an opportunity for growth, both individually, as a community, and as a country.
Thank you so much for having a conversation with Chhaya. I learned a lot about you.
Yeah.
You got my full support, and with Mekong NYC, I see you guys doing nothing but great things for years to come. And
Thank you.
I just want to thank you so much, and
Yes.
wish your family a happy New Year, happy Lunar New Year,
Yes.
and stay safe and stay healthy. And let me know how we can support. I'll leave all your info in the on the screen in the description as well, so people
Nice.
can learn more about Mekong. And if people want to get involved that are living in New York, they could check out the website. And do you guys serve all of New York City? Like, say, like I'm in Brooklyn, so I got friends that live in Brooklyn that are Khmer, and it's always people hitting me up on DM. Where's it? Where the Khmer people at? Or where's the Khmer New Year's at? So I'm like, Mekong. I'll just tell them
Of
Mekong.
course.
We have a community here, and Chhaya is the boss lady. And let's be friends.
Yes, that's right. We are home. Home is Mekong, and that's why we called it Mekong, right? Because the river runs through all the three countries. And so, what did you ask me?
If people could can get involved with any communities, related events and stuff like that, or if they need like help with filling out their citizenship and stuff like that, I could always point them to you.
Everything, healthcare, citizen eviction,
deportation issues,
all that stuff. We're like a one-stop shop. Deportation. That's in 5 years we are hoping to pass a bill, and another time we could talk about it. But we believe in returning our people, our brothers and sisters who've been deported, back here home to their family. And so we are committed to that, building that national and international work to do that. And so right now, we're building different strategies. We're doing a lot of case management, freeing people from detention centers who've been there longer than 90 days, which is illegal. So we do a lot of case management, post-conviction relief for folks, fighting for people to be with family, fighting for our family and our community, and to have people be brought back home. So in 4 years, we'll celebrate the ending of this administration. And so it is sad that yesterday, he went back and reneged on his moratorium on deportation. So I think we're going to be still in a fight to bring people back under this administration.
It's an ongoing fight. So for the
ongoing.
Longest,
but we are bringing people back. People are being returned. So we are hopeful.
It's steps in the right direction, and can only get better from here. So thank you for all that you do, and keep fighting the good fight, Chhaya. And I thank you so much. All right.
All right.
Take care. Okay.
So thank you. Bye. You too. Stay safe. Ciao,